Hi, today you and I are going to be talking about something really fascinating. We are going to be talking about all there is, all there was, and all there ever will be. I am talking about something that is so basic, something that is so fundamental, something that at its heart connects everything around us. And it is quite fascinating to realize that every time we try to describe who we are in our innermost being, there seems to be a rather profound element of mystery always and always, because who we are in our innermost being will forever escape our imagination, people say, in rather the same way that you can't bite your own teeth, or you can't look into your eye without a mirror, or you can't touch the tip of this finger with the same tip of this finger. I am talking about the phenomenon of consciousness. Now, I would like to ask you a very, I wouldn't say a religious question or a philosophical question. Maybe you can call it a bit unsettling. Maybe not so much. But what if everything that we know to be true, everything that we perceive to be our reality, is merely an illusion? And I say that to say, what if our beliefs, our fears, even boiling down to our very identity, how we see and perceive ourselves and our being, was merely an illusion? What if? I'd like you to sit with that as we dive deep. Now, if you look behind me, there's a very sophisticated drawing, I would say. This is representative of a cave. Now, I want you to imagine that there is a group of people who were born in a cave. The cave is all they have ever known. This is a group of people, you can call them a civilization on their own, who live and have been chained to the ground over here with their eyes turning upwards. This is all their gaze sees since they were born, mind you. Now, these people are then what? Forced as a result to only keep seeing this. So over time, also, mind you, in this same cave, there's a group of people who are holding torches over here. This is a source of light, as you can see. We don't know who these people are, neither do they. But these people have a source of light, and they have the source of light held up. And what happens over time is there are images going up over on this side, and what happens is there's a light that is cast over here, which these people are terming as their reality, the visible world that they see. This is their visible world, which is nothing, mind you, but images that are being cast on a shadow over here. But these people have no idea. Now, imagine one time, one of these people from this civilization, let's call it the Baku civilization. That makes no sense, but we'll just take it, Baku civilization, whatever. Let's say one guy from the Baku civilization finds himself up here some way, somehow one day. Then he sees that there's a whole world outside. What do you think is going to happen first of all? First of all, he's going to be so blinded by the light that he sees outside, because all he has known is darkness, and darkness is representative of what? Ignorance. Finally, he sees the light. He sees there's a whole world out there. And then he thinks to himself, whilst being blinded, he realizes something as well, that wow, what I had lived over here for the past years, my whole bloodline, my whole civilization, what they have understood as their reality over here was merely an illusion. So he thinks to himself, man, I gotta come back. I gotta tell the rest of the Baku tribe that, yo, there's a whole world outside over here. So let's call this guy Mingu. So Mingu walks back to the Baku tribe and tells his people, hey, I have just seen a whole beautiful world outside here, and I think what we are seeing here is just an illusion. What do you think they're going to do to him? First of all, they would mock him, obviously. They'd call him a fool. Heck, they'd even try to kill him if they want to, because imagine a whole belief system, a whole world being built around what we call reality, what we know to be true. And then Mingu over here goes comes back and tells them, hey, this is not what it is. There's a whole world out there. Now, this is just an allegory that has been used over the centuries to explain human understanding of our world that we live in. Now, this cave we see over here, this picture that we see over here, what if the cave is not merely a cave, but it is representative of what? Our state of mind. Sorry, I'll try to keep that down. State of mind. And what if we've already established, as a result of Mingu heading out and then coming back to inform the rest of people in the Baku tribe, that their reality was nothing but what? An illusion. The ancients call it Maya. Now, again, in order for this illusion to work, like I said, these people have been chained and all they can see is this screen because they have their heads turned over to that side. They have their attention focused on that side. So what if this metals that chain them is not necessarily metal, but it is symbolic of attention? So we are going to call these, let me get a different color chalk. These are the chains. We are going to call these the chains of attention. And attention is really, really important because attention is quite literally a currency that creates in our physical world. So these are the chains of attention. They are not necessarily metal because as they are chained over here and they have their heads pointed over at the top, this is all they are going to see. Now, what if these torches, again, because like I said, these people have torches up there and it's casting shadows. So this is providing them as a what? This is giving them a source of knowledge, something that is illuminating their world, so to say. So this torch of knowledge, I don't know why I said these. So this is knowledge. But as Mingu headed out and saw a whole world out there, you see that this knowledge is also representative of consciousness as a whole, where you get to expand your worldview and understanding of the universe you reside. When it comes to our understanding of the universe and our relationship with it, it is very important for us to realize, first of all, that we are a microcosm of the macrocosm, which is the universe. And I have seen over and over, as I have tried and I have dug deeper and deeper in research trying to understand the nature of consciousness, I have seen people try to define it using its manifestations, which has done nothing but bring about an unwarranted assumption on its nature, without tying what it means back to the self. So today we are going to define consciousness in a way that ties it back to the self, because the self is the animating force of consciousness. The self as well is the field through which reality unfolds. Reality as we know it begins from within. So we are going to define what it means. Every phenomenon which we know, everything that we have seen, everything that we have loved, everything that we have touched, heard, smelled, everything arises within our own consciousness. So if this is supposed to be a one big dude, how do I draw a dude out of this guy? These are his arms. Yeah. Okay. And yeah, this is our dude right here. And he's consciousness. And I'm saying that consciousness is the field through which there's an experience of all there is, all there has been, and all there will be. Everything that has transpired since the beginning of time to the end of time will be felt and experienced within consciousness. It is the field through which there's an experience of all phenomenon ranging from physical to the mental and spiritual. And it is very important to realize this, because we as human beings also exist on three planes, these same three planes. And within these three planes, the mental and the spiritual, they are known as the realm of cause. Everything that we see in reality, everything that we perceive and hold and ascribe meaning to, arise from here. They are all being generated from the mental and the spiritual plane before we see it on the physical plane, which we call reality, also known as the realm of effect. Consciousness, again, is something that cannot be directly addressed. We cannot directly describe what consciousness is. We simply have to rest in being, because consciousness is the context through which there's an explanation of anything at all. But if it happens so that we all are indeed conscious beings, and that our consciousness, which is the field through which there's an experience of everything physical, mental and spiritual, with the mental and the spiritual being closely linked, also known as the realm of cause, then what causes consciousness even? What gives birth or gives rise to consciousness? There's something we call a causal. When we say something is a causal, it means something that happens without cause. Now, how can something happen without cause? Something can happen without cause if, first of all, it exists outside time. It is not in time. If it is not in time, then how does it permeate and animate everything that we know around us? Because once again, it is what makes time knowable. Cause and effect have to play in time, but consciousness is what makes time knowable in the first place. Consciousness does not do anything. It simply allows doing to be done. So you can think of it this way as well. Now, you can think of it in two ways, actually, but I think this one should work. I'd like you to imagine a giant television screen. So this is a giant TV screen. There's a movie on the screen, and there's a whole bunch of things happening. There's explosions, there's fireworks, there's people falling in love, there's people dying, there's parties, there's literally everything you can think of. Now, all the action that happens, whether it's from the explosions or from the love making, all that does not affect the TV. Even if there are wild explosions in the TV, so to say. This is a loose analogy for you to grab the concept of consciousness. But if there are wild explosions, so to say, and everything is exploding, boom, 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 it never affects the TV in itself. All the explosions are happening within the TV, but it doesn't affect it because the TV is the field for every action to take place, which is the same as our human consciousness. So to say, even our death doesn't even affect our consciousness, so to say. But that will be another topic for another day. Okay, so we have just gone over the mystery of being, where we have established and remembered the fact that everything that we see around us, everything that we have perceived is nothing but an outward manifestation of our own minds, which is streaming from our own consciousness. But if that is the case, how come that so many of us do not identify this way? How come that there seems to be separation? Identifying ourselves as pure bodies and as human beings on earth who are going about life and life gets to push us around in all directions, and we have no say, and we are just here as guests, and we are going to die, and we're going to go. How is all this the narrative that is permeating today? How is that the winning argument today? Because there exists an illusion of separation where we see ourselves as separate from the universe, when we don't identify ourselves as microcosms of the macrocosm, which is the universe. There begins to be consequences. And this illusion begins from the time we were born. Remember the people in the cave, the Baku civilization in the cave? They begin to say the word I, and from that, consciousness begins to split itself. Now, what happens when you say the word I? When you say the word I, you identify with a state of being. You identify yourself in a certain way. And that is part of the illusion. Because as we are growing in society, we pick up stories, we pick up names, we pick up responsibilities and roles, and most of us confuse that for what our actual being is in itself. But what we are basically deep down, far in, is the universe itself. So this illusion of separation, where we go about feeling completely alienated from our external world, where we see ourselves not as being born out of this world, like how the leaves grow out of the tree, how we flourish. This is how we spring out of this world. When we have an understanding of consciousness that ties back to the self. So the illusion of separation, where you identify with your work, your name, your body, your beliefs, your fears. When you say the word I, as you are now, with your awareness, a lot of these different factors come into being. And all that is part of the separation, which exists literally as an illusion, because that illusion we can quite literally break away. Now ask yourself, who are you? When the question arises, when anyone dares to ask themselves, who am I? Underneath my work, underneath my name, underneath my body, underneath my beliefs, my fears, even the things that I love. Underneath all that, who are you really? And we know the answer. We know the answer. And this is very, very prevalent, especially in our time, especially us as Africans. We live in a world, or we live in a time now where more than ever we don't know who we are. The problem of identity has really been causing much problems. I think the root cause of much of Africa's problem is tying down to identity. The fact that we don't know, or we have been made to forget who we are at our core. But once we start fighting the illusion, we realize that we are literally microcosm of the macrocosm of all that there is, which is the universe. And there's what? A relationship. A way to identify with it. So once we know that there's a relationship and all that is reflective within the self, and the self is also the animating force of our consciousness, then you begin to see yourself as bigger. You don't identify with limitation. If indeed everything around us is consciousness, and consciousness is all there is, then it is okay to ask that how does consciousness create reality? And it does that through three living principles. This is the three living principles our consciousness creates reality with, or consciousness creates reality with. Perception, identity, and attention. Perception, we need to realize that every experience there is out there rises within awareness. When we talk about perception, you can see perception as a form of portal that expands your awareness to an understanding. That is what perception is, how you perceive yourself. I often ask people what is the historical outlook on their lives, and they think it's a very unnecessary question in the sense that if you look at your life, what do you think your origin is as a human being? It is not so much so as an important question, but it is actually very important. What is the historical outlook of your life? Especially when it comes to Africans. And remember, Africa is you and me. How do we perceive ourselves as Black people? Are we descendants of slaves like the mainstream history teaches us to accept and believe? How do we perceive ourselves? Because perception, like I said, is where every awareness, where everything rises within awareness, and that is how we perceive. And through that, we have an understanding of who we are. So, and one thing about perception is that you do not see the world as it is; you see the world as you are. You don't see the world as it is. You see the world as you are. So the question is, how do you see yourself? How do you perceive yourself? Do you see yourself to be a puppet that life seems to be throwing about left and right, not having a place to belong? Do you perceive yourself to be a microcosm of the macrocosm, where there exists a relationship between you and God? And then next is identity. Now, identity is also a very important factor, especially once again in the face of us Africans in the grand scheme of things, and how our history has evolved, how we identify ourselves as Black people is very, very important. And that is also a very key principle in how our consciousness is being created. And the last is attention, where we give our attention to, because we have to realize that where attention goes, energy flows, and that is a universal law. So these are the three living principles through which our consciousness creates reality. Now, if you want to dive into the mechanics of creation in itself, we have to realize that, so there's a doctrine which actually peers all the way back in time in ancient Africa, in the land of Kemet, where we have a mighty sage by the name of Hermes Trismegistus, who is the physical embodiment of universal wisdom. And he propounded or came up with 7 living principles that he taught and understood that permeate everything that we know in the universe, from the smallest atom to the giant spinning galaxies. These laws are laws that permeate through everything that we know, and they are 7 living principles. The first is that all is mind. Now we are going to see what the all is, but these are the 7 principles. The all is mind, also known as the principle of mentalism. Now we are going to understand who or what the all is in a minute, but we are going to go through the principles. This is the first principle, which is the principle of mentalism. We have another principle called the principle of what? Cause and effect. Cause and effect. Now, to go through this 1-2 quickly, every principle has an axiom that is related to it, and the axiom is meant for you to understand what the principle is in a brief summary of it. So when we say the principle of mentalism, there's an axiom that goes that the all is mind and the universe is mental, which means the universe is a mental or a mind creation. Now, the second principle is the principle of cause and effect. And it goes, or it states that for every cause, there is an effect, and for every effect, there is a cause. And remember that we also established that cause and effect are closely interrelated with the mental and spiritual realms, with the physical being the realm of effect. Now, we are going on to the third principle. I'm going to explain how these 7 principles construct reality as well. Now, the third principle is the principle of correspondence. Principle of correspondence. And what the principle of correspondence states is that as above, so below. Correspondence, as within, so without. And there's another principle that states, this is the principle of duality, or simply put, duality. And what it states is that all things have poles, and the poles are opposites of the same thing. That hot and cold are basically varying degrees of the same thing, in that if you take a thermometer, you will never be able to tell the part where cold ends and hot begins. It is simply varying degrees of the same thing. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4. I said there were 7 principles. We call them 7 hermetic principles. Yeah. These are the 7 hermetic principles. Now, we have another one, which is the principle. We have the principle of gender. And what the principle of gender basically states is that there's male and female in everything. The male and female is constituent within everything that we see or perceive. There's a male and the female elements. The male elements representing a moving force, and the female representing a creative force. And then there's the principle of rhythm. What the principle of rhythm states is that everything flows up, down, left, right, in, out, to and fro. There's always a flow. Nothing is stagnant. And that leads to the last hermetic principle, which is the principle of vibration. Let me get another chalk. Principle of vibration. And the principle of vibration states that everything that you can think of, from the realm of your imagination to physical things, everything is in constant vibration. Nothing is resting. Everything is in constant movement. And the axiom says nothing rests, everything moves, and everything vibrates. So these are the 7 living principles which are emanated from the all. These 7 living principles all the way over here, they all emanate, or they are properties of what the Hermetists call, what the Hermetists call the all. And the Hermetists calling something the all is a way of calling something supreme, that the all is God, so to say. That if you take God, there are these 7 living principles that are present in anything that is God. Also, Thales of Miletus, who was a Greek philosopher, also said, before Thales of Miletus, there have been a lot of figures that have spoken about the mind and consciousness and all being mind, and the mind being the first cause. Thales of Miletus said that God was inherent in all things. So tying it back to the all, how we are all made in the mind of the all. And the all is something that exhibits these 7 principles, as well as everything else around us. So this is the principle or the mechanics. These principles are known as the mechanics of creation in itself. And these principles permeate everything that we know, from the smallest galaxy to the giant star, the sun. So, yeah, these are they. So we've established the fact that our consciousness, our human consciousness, creates our reality through these 3 living principles, through how we perceive ourselves. And we've established that you don't see the world as it is, you see the world as you are. In identity, how we identify ourselves. If you want to take black people, if you want to take Africans, how do Africans identify themselves in the face of everything? Now, I came up with this lecture as a result of a deep analysis, or a deep metaphysical analysis of the collective conscience of black people and Africans in the face of everything that has transpired from pre-colonial times to now. The fact that most of us walk around not knowing our history, our pre-colonial history, we've forgotten who we are, our cosmology has been tempered with, and every civilization, this is a known fact that every civilization that forgets its cosmology slowly declines. So hence why there's a call for this wisdom to come back, for us to know where we are all emanating from. And last is attention. Like we said, that where you give attention to, energy will always flow as a consequence of universal law. And then we come to the mechanics of creation in itself, which were handed down from Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes Trismegistus, who was a contemporary of Moses in the Old Testament. That's how far back Hermes Trismegistus dates. And he laid down these universal laws. And these are indispensable. If you dive deep into science, into physics, into chemistry, metaphysics, these are laws you simply cannot do without. All is mind, the universe is mental, tells us that everything that we see is an outward manifestation of our own mind, that the mind is the root cause of all, that there are no physical things. There are, in fact, things. There are no things, there are only things. Thinks. Things, in the sense that everything is mind, and mind is constituent in all. Now, the principle of cause and effect, to go over again, everything has a cause and everything has an effect. Every effect has a cause and every cause has an effect. The principle of correspondence, as above, so below. The same laws or the same consciousness that spin galaxies is the same consciousness that is beating your heart. It is the same consciousness that is making me talk to you right now. It is the same consciousness that is making everything around us perceivable. So, yeah. Okay. So once we begin to start seeing ourselves from separate from the world, and we start identifying ourselves and seeing ourselves as part of the universe begins to show us its abundance and its glory, everything in its full glory. But if we live seeing ourselves as aliens, as people who come into the world and who the world will go on without, even if we die, then there's limitation and there is fear of death and there is lack. And that we are not trying to do that anymore. We are trying to live